G'day, and welcome to Pints with Aquinas. My name is Matt Fradd. Today we will be debating the resolution, is marriage a bad deal for men? In the affirmative, we have Pearl Davis, and then in the negative, we have Trent Horn. We're going to have 10-minute opening statements, 5-minute rebuttals, 20-minute cross-examinations, a time of Q&A for 30 minutes, and then 5-minute closings. The reason we wanted to do that is sometimes in these discussions, people interrupt each other, and the person doesn't get to make the case that they'd like to make. So that's why we're doing that. But before we jump into it, I was wondering if you could both tell us a bit about yourself. Pearl, ladies first.
Hi, my name is Pearl. I have the YouTube channel, Just Pearly Things. We have 2 million subscribers on there.
Well done.
I've interviewed over 1,000 men and women on marriage, dating, and relationships. I also have a call-in show. I've interviewed people all across the world, from London to Africa to Vegas to California. I'm doing a divorce documentary. So That'll be out in the next year.
Where will that be? Do you know?
My website, theaudacitynetwork.com.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Trent Horn. I am an apologist for Catholic Answers, and I am the host of the Council of Trent podcast on YouTube. I'm the author of about a dozen books, and I'm married and blessed with 3 wonderful children.
All right. Well, are you ready?
Yeah.
Whenever you start, I'll click the timer. You've got 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So, I don't know. I'm kind of nervous.
You will do fantastic. These things are always weird. It's always weird to get people into a room
oh my gosh.
and tell them to disagree with each other. This is what my wife and I should do when we argue. You have 10 minutes, go.
10 minutes,
I'll moderate that.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Okay. All right.
Take your time. You're terrific.
I'm going to go. All right. So, marriage today is a bad deal for men, meaning that it is more likely to not work out than it is to work out. 51% of those that sign up for marriage are not in a better place. Out of 100 men, at least 50 are not getting a good deal, essentially. I would like to clarify that I am not talking about some religious sect. I am talking about average Americans. On top of that, there is a huge legal risk you are facing as a man. Again, I am not here to discuss the religiosity of marriage, but I'm here to talk about the outcomes of marriage in 2024, as well as the legal ramifications for getting married. I've interviewed over 1,000 women and men on marriage and relationships, and have been putting together a documentary on family court, and have found that most men have no idea what they are signing up for when they get married. Marriage is objectively a bad deal for men in 2024. What I would consider a bad deal is where the risk outweighs the reward. What I would consider a successful marriage is an obedient wife and staying together for a lifetime. To put it simply, men want sex, silence, and sandwiches from a woman they are attracted to. Unfortunately, women are not offering that in 2024. Women have zero interest in being wives. Gen Z women rank men 7th on their priority list, coming behind things like education, travel, and experiences. Millennial women are not much better. They rank men as 4th behind their careers, education, and finances. I personally have interviewed over 1,000 women from London to Miami to Vegas and even the suburbs of Chicago. And I can tell you firsthand that most young women have no interest in being wives. This can be shown by women's outcomes and choices. Many men, like Trent, have been married for years and have no idea what the dating market is like for young people. 1 out of 3 women have had an abortion in the United States. 1 out of 4 women has an STD. 90% of women have been on birth control at some point in their life. 80% of sexually active women will contract HPV at some point in their lifetime. The average woman is 5'3" and 170 pounds. On top of that, men can never really know the sexual past of the woman they are marrying. Dating apps have made promiscuity more accessible and easier to hide. Women have a great incentive to lie about their sexual past. The CDC reports that the average number of sexual partners for a woman is between 4 and 8. But I can tell you from interviews that I have done that below 10 is considered low nowadays. This is especially crazy considering once a woman has over 5 sexual partners, she is less likely to have a stable marriage. After women have had over 10 sexual partners, the chance of a happy marriage drops to merely 14%. Only 3% of women report waiting for marriage for a religious reason. A quarter of women have a mental illness. Over half of women between the ages of 18 to 29 have at least 1 tattoo. The average woman has at least $26,000 worth of debt. And on top of that, young women are officially out cheating and out drinking men. That makes marrying a woman today a higher risk than times of the past. But let's look at marriage. What benefits are given to men in in marriage. 100 years ago, men would have gotten a debt-free virgin who gave him 4+ children and was expected to obey him. Unfortunately, now modern marriage is simply whore management. The majority of women are not known to be obedient wives. How do we know this? From one, we have phrases like, it's cheaper to keep her and happy wife, happy life. If women were so obedient and good wives, why are all of the phrases focused on bending to the will of the woman? On top of that, we can look at women's choices during marriage. Some common problems that I have found is that women gain a significant amount of weight in marriage. On average, women gain 24 pounds within the first 5 years of marriage. It would be one thing if women were giving men 4+ children like they were 100 years ago, but on average, women give men 1 to 2 children. The other issue we have is sexless marriages. When we look at the boomer generation, a third of them are in sexless marriages. Many men have reported that women stop sleeping with them after they have children. How many men would sign up for marriage if they knew that they no longer would have sex, their wives would no longer have sex with them? Now, while this is not the majority of those marriages, that is still not insignificant. Men are not even guaranteed an in-shape wife who sleeps with them. Now let's talk about the legal ramifications of marriage and family for men. I do not say this with a happy heart, but there is simply no legal way to stop a woman who wants to divorce you from doing so. My logic is quite simple. When you pay people to do the wrong thing, more people will do it, even seemingly good people. Unfortunately, men, the divorce system heavily benefits women, and the stats reflect that. Women file for divorce 70% of the time, and 73% of the time, the reason given is irreconcilable differences. This does not make sense considering people date on average 3 years before marriage. What differences did you not notice in those 3 years? This makes sense considering the rising body counts and how promiscuous women are going into marriage. This is not only devastating to men, but also deadly. Men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide following a divorce. Child support is tied to Social Security and Title 4D, and if you cannot pay, the government can take away your money directly from your bank account, ruin your credit score, take away even your fishing license, take money directly from your paycheck, and even throw you in jail. The best interest of the child is a principle to ensure government policies safeguard the rights and holistic needs of children. It is standard used in family law to make decisions impacting a child in matters of adoption, child custody, guardianship, and visitation. This principle means that any situation should be looked at from the child's point of view. This sounds nice in theory, but this law is weaponized against men all across this country. This means the best interest of the child, even in cases where you are lied to about paternity. For example, in California, if you are on the child's birth certificate after the age of 2 and you were lied to about paternity, you are on the hook for child support for 16 years. There are many ways that women weaponize the family court in order to drain resources from men, but I'm going to list a couple I have seen. I have seen temporary restraining orders set to separate fathers from children. Men can be kicked out of the house they pay for on a moment's notice with a restraining order. In that time period between her filing it and going to court, the mother can put the father on child support because technically she is spending more time with the children. What is not considered is that the woman spent more time with the kids because she had not been letting the dad see them due to the restraining order. This is not illegal for women to do, and there is no punishment. I interviewed one man in London who had spent over $100,000 fighting for his children and still had not seen them in 2 years. I interviewed another man whose wife tried to transition his kid without his permission. I interviewed another man who, I interviewed another man whose wife was trying to transition his kid without his permission. It took him 3 years and over $50,000 to get custody. Imagine if he did not have the money. Many men go into bankruptcy trying to fight for their children. A case I covered in the state of Chicago, a father had paid over $1 million to his ex-wife during a divorce and was still thrown in jail because he could not keep up with his $10,000 a month payment. The child support payment is calculated by current earnings, so if a man loses his job, which many do due to the stress of divorce, he is still on the hook for child support even if he cannot afford the money. Child support is given based on the amount of time that children that dads are given with the children, and that women have incentive to not give men access to their children and are rewarded for doing so. Many men in this process find themselves homeless because they cannot keep up with child support payments. The loss of a child is one of the leading indicators of mental illness. Many men that I have interviewed have compared this to death. Losing a child they would rather die than live a life without their children. And the stats show that many men pick death over this reality. Another thing that most do not know is that family court is not based on evidence. It's based on a balance of probabilities rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. This means it is easier to allege that a man abused you in family court without evidence. Mainstream cases like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp show just how easy it is for women to ruin a man's reputation with no evidence. Many times the women are actually given free resources from domestic abuse centers in order to assist women in this. In many areas, the courts have alleged that the definition of abuse has changed in the last 50 years to include things like emotional abuse, financial abuse, and have also changed the definition of rape from forced sex to sex without consent. The problem you get when you change these definitions to be more broad is that women are allowed to say things like yelling is abuse and he did not let me spend $5,000 on my credit card, therefore he is abusive. I have seen cases where men were accused of raping a woman the first time they hooked up and they were married 10 years after. Women weaponize this against men. The problem you get with these definitions that are more broad, that women are allowed to abuse the system. As I said before, losing a child is like death to a lot of men. One area that we studied was veteran suicide. 44 veterans a day commit suicide, and over 400,000 men have died due to suicide in the last 25 years. To put it into perspective, since the Revolutionary War, 650,000 have died in battle. In 25 years, we have hit 2/3 of that. Terrence Popp has worked with veterans for 15 years, and through our personal research, have found that 70% of veteran suicides have come in contact with family court in the last 5 years. Family court is literally killing men every day, and nobody is talking about it. On top of that, fathers have to watch their mothers raise children in a way that sets up their children for failure. Single mother homes account for 63% of youth suicides, 90% of the homeless and runaways, and the majority of school shooters, where single father homes fare similar to two parents homes. I personally have interviewed men who had to watch a mother try to transition their kid, and I had one case where a mother's new boyfriend had accusations of being a pedophile, and there was nothing the man could do. Let's go over this again. The upside is that men get a woman who has slept with at least 4 other men and maybe 2 children out of the deal. On average, the woman will be 170 pounds and 5'3". Odds are she at least likely has 1 tattoo, some debt, and maybe even a previous child in tow. The downside is you can lose half your assets, your children, your reputation, homelessness, and you can be put on child support, alimony, and even thrown in jail. Personally, I would never sign a business deal that encourages that kind of risk, but for whatever reason, men are encouraged to sign a business deal that does.
Okay. You literally finished with 1 second to spare. You crushed that. Well done.
Thank you.
For someone who's not used to time debates, you did really well. Okay. Trent, whenever you're ready, I'll click the 10-minute mark.
Excuse me. All right. Well, Pearl has the burden of showing that marriage is a bad deal for men, and all I have to do is show that she hasn't made her case. And notice in Pearl's opening statement, she never cites a study of married men in general to see whether they think marriage is a bad deal. So to show that she's wrong, I'm going to point out 3 fallacies that Pearl makes in her arguments. So first, there's the wrong target fallacy. For example, Pearl talks about how marriage is a bad deal because men are sometimes mistreated in child custody cases. That's not unique to marriage. If you cohabit or even just hook up with a woman, you can still father a child and deal with custody issues. However, marriage makes a man the presumed father of the child with natural rights unmarried fathers don't have, even though unmarried fathers can still be liable to pay child support. The children of unmarried men are 10 times more likely to be aborted. And if the child does survive the pregnancy, he's 3 to 6 times more likely to live in poverty. The hazards of unmarried, much less for married men. Another wrong target is women themselves. Pearl says marriage is bad for men because modern women are worse than previous generations of women. But that says nothing about marriage. If modern women are good enough for hookups that can result in children, or cohabiting relationships that superficially feel like marriage, but are far more likely to fail, then modern women are good enough for marriage, which has less harms for men. And Pearl can't use these stats to dunk on women because men are also worse than previous generations. Modern men are just as promiscuous and are even more overweight than modern women. A 2019 Experian study found that men carry more credit, auto, and mortgage debt than women. Millennial and Gen Z men have weaker grip strength and make less money than older men did at their age. Pearl has not shown that women are not good enough for men. Instead, the data shows men and women are both in bad shape compared to previous generations. But there's hope. Marriage is the best way for men and women to mature together and bring out the best in one another. Second, there's the anecdote fallacy. One sad story about a marriage does not show marriage itself is bad, because for every sad story Pearl can bring up, I can statistically bring up 2 to 3 good stories about happy marriages. And there are many stories about sad, sick, lonely men who never marry. Pearl cannot prove her case with anecdotes. She needs actual data that proves married men are worse off than unmarried men, but no such data exists. Even marriage skeptics will only argue at best that marriage doesn't increase happiness. They all agree that men who marry are better off concerning health, wealth, and happiness than men who never marry. If Pearl can't provide peer-reviewed data to prove otherwise, then her case fails. Third, there's the comparison fallacy. Instead of stories involving the risks of marriage, Pearl often at times just points to the risks of marriage itself and says that's a good enough reason to not marry. She says, just as you wouldn't fly on a plane that has a 5% chance of crashing, you shouldn't get married, even if it has similar low odds of divorcing. But if you look at the worst outcomes of one choice while ignoring the worst outcomes of another choice, that's the comparison fallacy. It's like someone who thinks driving is safer than flying because they only read a bunch of stories about plane crashes and never think about car crashes. Of course, flying is far safer than driving, and marriage is less risky than non-marriage. You cannot compare the best outcomes of non-marriage to the worst outcomes of marriage. To be fair, you must compare the typical outcomes in both cases, be it flying versus driving or marriage versus non-marriage. And Pearl exaggerates the harms of marriage and ignores the harms of not marrying. For example, according to the National Center for Family and Marriage Research, the median length of all marriages is not 7 to 8 years, as Pearl often claims. That's the length of marriages that end in divorce, not all marriages. The median length for all marriages is 21 years. And the divorce rate is closer to 35%, not 50%. 50% was a future projection from the 80s that has since been falsified. In fact, we are now seeing the lowest divorce rates since 1970, about 14 divorces per 1,000 married women. For weekly churchgoers, the divorce rate is half the average rate. Also, just because 35% of marriages end in divorce, that doesn't mean you have a 1 in 3 chance of absolute misery. Divorce sucks, but people typically survive it intact. In fact, men do better than women after divorce. Men's income increases by 20% on average, while women are twice as likely to fall into poverty after divorce. Alimony is only paid out in less than 10% of divorces. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the average child support payment is $441 a month, of which only 60% usually ends up getting paid. Moreover, women do not get child custody 90% of the time, as others claim. 95% of custody cases are mutually agreed upon outside of the courtroom. Women get full custody 40% of the time, men get full custody 20%, and shared custody makes up the remaining 40%. Women usually get full custody because men don't ask for it. In a Massachusetts study of 24,000 divorces, only 8% of men sought custody, and 94% of them got full or partial custody. Finally, a 2006 study in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health showed that while divorced men were 27% more likely to die prematurely, 58% of never married men were more likely to die early. Never married men risk growing older and having few or no social connections. Pearl can tell lots of horror stories, apparently, about men going through messy divorces. And my wife, who is a registered nurse, can tell you all kinds of horror stories about men dying alone in the hospital, spending every day by themselves, staring at the same blotch on the ceiling because they had no one to ever come and visit them. Now, some men desire marriage and are unable to find a wife, which is tragic. But rejecting marriage out of fear is like the person who refuses to go to the hospital because he worries about medical errors, but doesn't think about people dying at home from easily treatable illnesses. The comparison fallacy once again. That's probably why 65% of divorced men get remarried. 93% of men say they would marry their spouse again if they could do marriage over. If Pearl is right, as she said in the past, that marriage is a death sentence for men, then why do most men voluntarily go back to death row after they've been released, i.e. divorced? Well, it's because these men correctly identify what Pearl has failed to grasp. Marriage is not bad for men. It's not a bad deal for men. In fact, marriage is typically a good deal for men. It's no wonder God told Adam in the book of Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone, and so he made Eve to remedy this problem. Now, to make it clear, it is a lie that half of all marriages end in divorce. The truth is that most marriages last a lifetime, and 80 to 90% of them identify as happy. A Gallup survey conducted between 2008 and 2020 of 800,000 adults showed that married people rate their well-being 12 to 17 points higher than unmarried people. The General Social Survey from the University of Chicago, a gold standard in sociological research, shows that married men are twice as likely to rate their lives as very happy when compared to non-married men. And the majority of married men, in fact, I'd say 80% of them, identify themselves as happy. Married men also make 10 to 20% more money per hour, and they have more sex than never married men. Pearl says that men face sexless marriages, but the General Social Survey shows that unmarried men are twice as likely to have a sexless life than a married man. Studies also show that even men who end up divorced live longer, are economically better off, and are just as or even happier than never married men. Now, Pearl might say these studies only prove that happier, richer men get married, and unhappy, poor men don't get married. But when you look at the typical married man, he is not a 6'2" rich Chad. Moreover, if a man chooses to marry, then he needs to become marriageable, which involves developing positive traits that both make him desirable to women and improve his own self-esteem at the same time. But I'm not arguing that marriage makes people happy. I'm arguing against Pearl's claim that marriage is a bad deal for men and steals their happiness. That's just not true. In fact, marriage is the best. You can't interrupt when I'm talking.
You get a 5 minute after this. He's got 1 minute.
Oh, sorry.
You're okay.
There will be time. I'm excited for that.
Okay.
In fact, marriage is the best way for men to not just hang on to happiness, but to increase it. The Harvard study of adult development, which tracked people for 80 years, said good relationships were the #1 predictor of happiness. And it showed that men who married ended up happier and lived 7 to 17 years longer than men who never married. And that's a study for people over 80 years of their life. When I was unmarried, let me actually go through here. Well, yeah, when I was unmarried, I thought that having 2 folding chairs and a TV on the ground were appropriate living room furniture. But when you're married, your wife shows you something better, and she roots for you. A 2013 Harvard study showed that married men are less likely to get cancer, and married men are even more likely to survive cancer, showing that marriage is a good deal for men. So finally, I'd be remiss to point out neither men nor women invented marriage. God invented marriage. He gave it to the human race. Christ raised it to the level of a sacrament. And Pearl would have to give overwhelming data to show that something that God gave us is actually a bad deal for men. And she won't be able to do that because the data doesn't support that. Indeed, for most men, marriage is the primary engine that helps them live a long, healthy, and happy life.
This time. All right. Good job, Trent. You have a 5 minute rebuttal, Pearl, whenever you're ready.
Wait, so how does do I ask him questions during the rebuttal?
No, that'll be after the break. This is basically your time, 5 minutes. He won't be able to interrupt you. You can try to refute the case he just made.
Got it. Okay.
So, and would it help you if you saw the time?
Yeah, sure.
Do you mind putting that there? Just
I didn't know that was there.
Yeah, that's his phone. But whenever you're ready.
Okay. 1 second. One thing I noticed in your arguments is that you constantly attribute all of the positive things that happen in marriage. You just automatically attribute them to women. You automatically attribute them to that marriage is the cause. I would disagree with that. I would say it's a bad deal because at the end of the day, women are paid to leave. You never addressed any solutions that you have. What solutions does the church have? Women don't want to be married. Men cannot make women marry that do not want to be married. Women are getting STDs. Women are getting abortions. The majority of women today are not marriageable. They're overweight. They're out of shape. And, saying that marriage is good isn't going to change that, isn't going to make women want to be wives. The next thing that I noticed that you said was that unmarried men are more likely to have a sexless life. Obviously. Obviously. Men that cannot attract women obviously are not, And you never address that men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide after marriage. Even if it's a 5%, 1 out of 50, even if it's a 1 out of 50 chance or 1 out of 100 chance that you commit suicide, that's negligence. That's negligence. Any car would be recalled if 1% of people died. I just think at the end of the day that I would never sign a deal that one party is paid to leave, and you're not addressing the lack of quality of women that are on the market today. Men cannot make women want to be wives. And if women don't want to be wives, basically, it's not gonna happen. The other thing is that, if marriage is such a good deal, why aren't men signing up? Good products, technically, they get off the market quickly. Men naturally, they want to do things that make sense. And the issue that you're going to get is that, again, the quality of women is lower than ever before. The cost of marriage is higher than ever before. And until that changes, until some of the laws change, it is just not a good deal for men.
You still have 2 minutes and 41 seconds if you'd like to keep going.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So you have a 5-minute rebuttal, Trent, whenever you want to begin.
Sure.
And if you want that, you're welcome. Ready?
All right.
Go for it.
All right. So I want to focus on one very clear fact that refutes Pearl's case, that she has not cited any studies looking at men and seeing what do they think. I mean, if marriage is such a bad deal for men, we don't need Pearl to tell us that. Why don't we just ask men themselves? Ask married men, were you given a bad deal? Were you given a raw deal? You go online, you go to Amazon, you go to all other kinds of places, you can see people write product reviews and saying whether they got a bad deal out of something. And you should probably trust someone who actually tried the product and wrote a review instead of someone writing reviews about a product they've never tried before. And I've already shown the data that married men identify as being more happier than unmarried men. They live longer, they're healthier. So marriage is a good deal for them. It certainly isn't a bad deal for them. They get many benefits out of that. And Pearl has not refuted that. All she's been reduced to saying is that marriage is a bad deal for men because apparently women aren't worth marrying, which is just not true. She's pointing out flaws in women, but she gives a pass to men. It's a kind of reverse form of simping, if you will, because men also fall under this. So let's talk about some of the things that she brought up. About the issues of being sexless, saying that 20% of marriages are sexless. That's only if you include senior citizens in the entire framework. As I said, the General Social Survey shows that unmarried men are twice as likely to be sexless as married men. So if you're a guy and if that's something that is important to you in your life, marriage is the covenant through which sex makes the most sense, you have the most access to it, and it's the safest and best thing for you and for the children that will proceed from your union. She made a big deal about weight. Women are overweight. Women gain 20 pounds in marriage. She's probably referring to the Gordon Larson 2009 study on that. But that same study showed that married men gain 30 pounds over the same period. Unmarried cohabiting women gain 18 pounds during that period, and single women gain 15 pounds during that period. So all that proves is as we get older, instead of growing up, we tend to grow out. That's just life. And it's nice as you get married to have someone else to grow up and out with you. And mature people recognize that and don't just reject marriage because of a biological fact of reality. Women don't want to be wives. There's no evidence Pearl gave to support that conclusion. At least I can look at anecdotally. Think about it in your own life. How many times have you heard a girl lament that her boyfriend, she'd love to get married, but her boyfriend doesn't want to get married, or he's dragging his feet? How many times have you can't interrupt him until the time is over. How many times have you heard a guy say, "Oh, I really wish I could get married, but my girlfriend's just dragging her feet"? Women are the ones. Women control access. Put it crudely, women control access to sex, and men control access to marriage. That's how it's worked traditionally, and it still works today. Pearl asked, if marriage is such a good deal, why aren't men and women signing up for it? Well, that's like asking, if exercise is good for you, why don't more people go to the gym? Why is the gym usually empty? It's because marriage is hard. You have to say no to a lot of things as a man. If you choose to get married, you have to say no to things your little lizard brain tells you are good, like trying to hook up with as many women as possible. So people probably don't sign up for it because they don't realize the benefits, and they listen to the lower part of the brain instead of the rational part of the brain that could read studies covering hundreds of thousands of men showing that they're happier, live longer, and have more sustaining, fulfilled lives than being unmarried. So some of the things that, when Pearl brings up, that divorced men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide, she's probably referring to the Kipawosa 2003 study. It's not that's not men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide who are divorced. They're 9 times more divorced men are 9 times more likely to commit suicide than divorced women. But that's only because men are just more likely to complete suicide anyways than women. They tend to choose more violent means to do it. So, but when you look at the data, never married men are still just as, if not more likely to commit suicide than divorced men. So that's the comparison fallacy once again. You talk about all of the risks related to marriage, and there are risks, but there are greater risks to being not married. So that shows marriage is not a bad deal. And as I said before, if marriage is such a bad deal for men, if it's so bad, why do 93% of men say they're willing to remarry their wives again if they had the chance? Why do 65% of divorced men choose and go and get remarried? It's because they recognize maybe someone wasn't right for them, but marriage was still right for them.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to have cross-examination, and Pearl, you'll have 20 minutes to drill Trent with questions, follow up whatever you want to follow up on, and then Trent, you'll have 20 minutes. So if you're watching right now, please stick around. Let us know how you think this debate is going in the live chat, and we'll be right back. I want to tell you about a course that I have created for men to overcome pornography. It is called strive21.com/Matt. You go there right now, or if you text STRIVE to 66866, we'll send you the link. It's 100% free, and it's a course I've created to help men, to give them the tools to overcome pornography. Usually men know that porn is wrong. They don't need me or you to convince them that it's wrong. What they need is a battle plan to get out. And so I've distilled all that I've learned over the last 15 or so years as I've been talking and writing on this topic into this one course. Think of it as if you and I could have a coffee over the next 21 days and I would kind of guide you along this journey. That's basically what this is. It's incredibly well produced. We had a whole camera crew come and film this. And I think it'll be a real help to you. And it's also not an isolated course that you go through on your own, because literally tens of thousands of men have now gone through this course. And as you go through the different videos, there's comments from men all around the world encouraging each other, offering to be each other's accountability partners and things like that. Strive21, that's strive21.com/Matt, or as I say, text STRIVE to 66866 to get started today. You won't regret it. I want to tell you about Hallow, which is the #1 downloaded prayer app in the world. It's outstanding. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Sign up over there right now and you will get the first 3 months for free. That's like a lot of time. You can decide whether it's useful to you or not, whether it's helpful. If you don't like it, you can always quit. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. I use it. My family uses it. It's fantastic. There are over 10,000 audio guided prayers, meditations, and music, including my lo-fi. Hallow has been downloaded over 15 million times in 150 different countries. It helps you pray, helps you meditate, helps you sleep better. It helps you build a daily routine and a habit of prayer. There's honestly so much excellent stuff on this app that it's difficult to get through it all. Just go check it out. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. The link is in the description below. It even has an entire section for kids. So if you're a parent, you could play little Bible stories to them at night. It'll help them pray. Fantastic. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Yep. Say when. You're back. G'day and welcome back to the debate. Before we jump into cross-examination, I want to invite you to consider becoming a local supporter at mattfradd.locals.com. When you do, you get a ton of free perks in return. I just had an almost 3-hour discussion with Jordan Peterson a couple of days ago. That's available right now over on Locals. Also, when you become an annual supporter, you get our free Pints with Aquinas beer stein. You get a ton of other things in return, but I don't have time to tell you about them. So mattfradd.locals.com, and a massive thanks to those of you who want to keep supporting the channel so we can keep bringing great guests on. Okay, so we are going to go into a time of 20-minute cross-examine, and I'm going to explain what it is for our viewers, okay? So Pearl's going to begin, and in cross-examine, she is free to lead the discussion however she wishes. She is welcome to interrupt Trent, to redirect Trent however she pleases. This is her time, so it's not considered rude if she does that, and vice versa when Trent does that. So let's see. Whenever you're ready, Pearl, you can begin with your 20 minutes.
1 second.
And if you'd like, I can let you know when you have 3 minutes left or something.
Okay, 1 second. Okay.
No worries. Take your time.
Do you think that women should be obedient to their husbands?
Yeah, I think that they should be obedient to their husbands when their husbands give them a rational request or directive. But I think that husbands and wives should lead each other to Christ and to the goodness of their family.
So what do you define as rational?
in accord with reason. So something that doesn't go against what reason would dictate.
Can I have an example?
Of
So
something,
like I'm assuming crimes.
of something that's rational or irrational.
Yeah, irrational.
Yeah, if a husband says
Like obviously no crimes, right?
Yeah, or if a husband says, I want you to lose a massive amount of weight, for example, that would put if your husband wants you to do something to change your body that would put your health at risk, I would say that's irrational.
Okay, but a normal amount of weight would be fine.
I would
right?
say I think it's fine for husbands and wives to want each other to be healthy, but it's very quickly that if a husband or a wife asks for a person to be of a certain weight, that can easily be more of it out of a desire for vanity than for the other person's well-being.
But what about health?
What about health? I think it's fine. I think it's good for husbands and wives to want each other to be healthy.
No, but I'm asking the husband. Why do you always bring it back to the husband? Because I'm asking about the wife. I didn't ask you about the husband.
Because I'm saying
for the husband, can he ask that his wife stays a certain weight? Is that rational?
It's rational for him to ask her to be healthy, but staying at a certain weight your entire life, that's not necessarily going to be healthy. Like saying, I want you to always be 120 pounds. Like, hey, I got pregnant. Oh, you're kind of getting past that now. I don't like that. That would be irrational. He would not be allowed to do that under your thought? I think it would be insane if a man said that his wife needs to stay a certain...
Why? Why? What's wrong with men having standards? What's wrong with that?
Pearl, you do realize that that's absolutely, literally there was a joke in The Office where BJ Novak says some supermodels lose weight when they're pregnant. That shows that he's just an insane chauvinistic person. To demand that a wife stay at a certain weight, even though as you get older, you naturally gain weight. And especially when you get pregnant, you gain at least 9 pounds of weight. That would be insane to demand that someone stay at a certain weight.
Women lose it all the time.
I fail to see how any of this is relevant to marriage, by the way.
Well, what I'm trying to understand is your mindset. So why can't men have standards in marriage? Because if you're saying that men can't have standards in their own marriage, you're saying it's irrational for a guy to demand his wife stay a certain weight. Why? Why is that wrong?
To stay a certain weight during their entire marriage?
Why? Why is that wrong?
Because
I've seen women do it.
Would you like me to answer the question?
Go ahead.
Okay. Because biologically, our bodies change over time. They'll naturally gain and lose weight in different circumstances. And your worth as a spouse, whether you are a husband or a wife, is not derived by your weight. That's just a shallow thing. Now, I think that both husbands and wives should encourage the other should encourage.
It's your job to be attractive.
I think husbands and wives should both maintain attractiveness.
Right, but why do you always have to bring it back? Because
why do you only focus on women?
Right now, because we're asking about the deal for men. Yeah. So I'm looking at this from the man's point of view. What does the man get out of it? Is this a good deal? He can't even ask for an in-shape wife.
He gets a woman
who can't even say 120
Can I answer the question?
Pounds?
Can I answer the question?
I'm asking.
He gets a woman who's promised to stay with him, even though statistically he'll gain 30 or 40 pounds.
And that because that's
does she have the right?
Women's job has far more of a job to be beautiful than men. Men's job is to protect and provide.
So do women have a right
what is wrong with a man asking that she stays a certain weight?
Because it's shallow. It's fine to ask someone to be healthy, and it's fine to encourage your spouse to maintain attractiveness, not to just let yourself go. But that's the same for husbands and wives. Neither should just let themselves go. But at the same time, each one should be merciful, knowing that time and age come for all of us.
The reason that the obesity, I've looked that up before, the reason that the men are more overweight than women is because you don't look at visceral fat. So when men are very high muscle percentage, they're still considered overweight more so than women. So a more accurate way to look at that is visceral fat. And women have higher rates of visceral fat than men. So actually women are more, and if you look at extreme obesity, women are more obese.
Yeah.
So so I don't know why you're kind of lying with that stat, trying to act like men are equally obese. They're not.
Well, men are still overweight, but that still doesn't show none of that shows marriage is a bad deal for men.
Should men marry women that have had abortions?
Should men marry women that have had abortions?
Should men marry women that have had abortions?
I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker.
Should men marry women with STDs?
I wouldn't say.
A quarter of women have herpes. Should men marry them?
I'm going to answer.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to answer your question. I would say just as it is not a disqualifier for if a man facilitated an abortion, and 90% of, so for every woman who chooses to get an abortion, 90% of the time, the man is actively or passively supporting it. So just as it's not a deal breaker for a woman.
I'm asking for the future man. I'm not saying this, that he asked her to abort his. This is another man's kid. She's had an abortion.
No, what I'm saying is I'm applying an equal standard here. So I would say that it is not a deal breaker for a man to marry a woman who's had an abortion, just like it's not a deal breaker for a woman to marry a man who had facilitated an abortion.
Should men marry women that have slept with over 10 men?
Should they marry someone who's slept with over 10 men? I would say that when you have more sexual partners, that's definitely that's something that's concerning. That could be a red flag.
So you would say no?
But that doesn't apply. I'm not going to say that someone is unmarriageable because of one particular trait.
What about porn?
Okay, what
about
porn?
women that have participated in porn? Should men marry women that have participated in porn?
I would say that that's definitely a red flag, but it is not it's not a deal breaker.
Do you have a son?
Can I answer the questions, Pearl? Because you can keep asking questions and I'll never answer them.
Because it just would be easier if I got a yes or no, because you keep giving me these roundabout and I'm just at yes or no.
No, I'm giving you good answers.
Go
okay,
ahead.
so I'd like to finish about pornography.
Go ahead.
I would say it's not a deal breaker if a woman had participated in pornography. Much the same way it is not a deal breaker. Well, it's something to be very, very worried about. So I'll answer it this way. It's very hard for me to find anything that's a deal breaker for marriage, except for maybe diagnosed severe mental illness, for example, or addiction to drugs, things like that. But that would apply to men and women. So when it comes to pornography, I would say it's very concerning if a woman had previously engaged in pornography, just like it is very concerning if a woman chooses to marry a man who's previously viewed pornography.
But this is my question. It's like, why can't men have standards? And this is what I've noticed from the trad community and like the conservatives. It's like the quality of women keeps going down and down and down. And we can't even definitively say, hey, maybe we shouldn't marry porn stars. Maybe we shouldn't marry overweight women. You know, it's like we constantly get rid of standards for men.
No, I'm fine with standards as long as...
we can't even... No, you're not, because you're not even definitively saying you shouldn't marry a porn star. You would never in a million years tell your son to marry a porn star.
An active, currly working porn star?
Even a previous porn
you
star.
said former.
Even former. You would never. Come on, someone you loved.
Okay.
And this is why.
You can keep talking, or you can ask me a question. Because I was going to say, I do believe in standards, Pearl. I just believe they should be applied equally. So if women have a past in porn and that makes them unmarriageable, fine. Then we should just say any man who's looked at porn, don't marry him either.
The equal.
Is it okay for men to look at porn?
You can ask that during your cross-examination.
The equal equivalent would be a man that's participated in porn. That would be the equal equivalent if we're really going to go apples to apples here. But what I'm asking is, okay,
there's lots of men who participate in porn that way.
You know, a quarter of women, up to a third, have an STD. Should men marry them?
Should they marry them?
Yeah.
Just the same reasons would apply if you asked women, should they marry men who have STDs? Because men have lots of STDs. And if it's okay to marry them.
But why is it what about the men? It's like the
because
craziest
men and women
thing.
are equal. Men and women are equal, and we should treat them equally.
It's the craziest. I don't think men and women are equal.
Are they equal in value and dignity?
No,
Sorry, just real quick. Trent, you can ask questions in your cross-examination.
Sure.
This is Pearl.
That's fine.
I'm not coming at this from a religious point of view. What I am saying is that you keep telling men to lower their standards. Because you were saying, wife up these whores. 3% of women, 100 years ago, men got a virgin. They got a virgin, 4+ kids. 3% of women are waiting till marriage nowadays. You're saying, wife them up anyway. Doesn't matter the risk. Who cares?
Do you have a question, Pearl?
So, yeah, I'm going to go back to STDs, not a deal breaker. Yes or no?
No, they're not. If they're not a deal breaker for men, they're not a deal breaker for women.
Okay. On top of that, porn, not a deal breaker?
Having been involved in pornography? No, it's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be very concerned about. The same as if a man had been behind the camera doing OnlyFans work or working at OnlyFans. But if he's truly repented, then people can really change, and we should give them mercy, whether they're a man or a woman. People
can change, but it doesn't mean they statistically do. And women that have made those decisions, statistically, the grass, statistically, it's not a happy ending for most of them. So that's the other question. Why would you would you ever sign a business contract that someone's paid to leave? So me and you are going to do business, and I get a bunch of money and your children if I leave. You would sign that contract.
If you get my children, because maybe we're pairing our YouTube channels together, probably not going to sell off my kids on that. But it's very common in business deals, Pearl, where if you have a high value business partner and you really want them to be a part of the venture, you might include things like a buyout clause or severance pay. That's not that uncommon to ameliorate risks or to encourage them to take part in the project.
Okay, so would you would you sign the contract or no?
Would I sign a contract? You've made it very
Where I'm paid to leave.
Where you're paid to leave if you're my business partner. It depends how much and what risk. Why can't you answer the question? Because your question is underdefined and it can't be answered. You've asked it in a very vague way, so I can only give a vague answer and reply.
Okay, me and you sign a business deal, and in that business deal,
go ahead.
And in that business deal, I get your whole YouTube channel if I leave. And I get your children. Are you signing it?
No, I'm not.
Exactly. That's the point. No, you're not signing it.
Because you haven't.
And this is the thing. They act like it's one-off instances. And this is what the academics tend to do. They'll say, here's a study funded by this organization, or here's another study. And they want you to not believe what's in front of your eyes. Men are not signing up for marriage today. And you can say it's that marriage is a great deal for men, but men are naturally logical. They do what makes sense. 100 years ago, men were still men, same software. They married women in 3 months. There's a reason it's gone up to 3 years.
I would sign a contract where if you're undergoing significant risk, and the whole point of things that if a marriage divorces is that women undertake risks. If they come and then they give up their careers and they stay home and raise children, for example, and they
the
do that
majority of women aren't doing that. The majority of women are not doing that statistically.
Okay.
3 out of 4 women are working, so that's not the majority.
The point is, if they go and do that and they take part in a marriage,
they don't want
you're going to be you're undertaking risks when you're involved in marriage. Well, as I stated before, women are twice as likely to end up in poverty after divorce than men.
Yeah, because women are bad with money.
No, what happens is women
have 80% of the world's debt. Women have 80% of the world's debt. Women are not good with money. And many
as I showed in my opening statement, men have the majority of debt.
And many men, it's not true. Women have 80% of the world's debt. And the other thing that they don't take into account is that
in this country, men have more. But go ahead.
And women have 80% of the world's debt. Women are not great with money, and men earn more as well too. And the thing is, you're not addressing the suicide problem. Do you not think that's a problem?
Of course, suicide's a problem. It's more of a problem for men who never marry.
I'm asking in divorce. They're 9 times more likely to commit suicide after a divorce.
They're 9 times more likely than a divorced woman. You're misreading the statistic.
And in family court, if they find within 5 years, many men do commit suicide. What do you think? You think it's just made up? You think it's just fake? All these men that are saying my life is ruined.
Yes,
let him answer it. Go
ahead.
No, because I've actually read the studies, and the problem is you're doing the comparison fallacy here. You're just picking, hey, if you get married, this bad thing can happen to you, or this bad thing can happen to you, and that's true. But if you choose to not get married, you can also have many bad things happen to you. You can grow up and have no social connections. You become a recluse, and you're more likely to commit suicide. You're more likely just to not take care of yourself. And the statistics show that on average, ever married men, including divorced men, live longer, are healthier, and rate their lives as happier than never married men. It's a statistical fact.
Because women date happy men.
So
women pick for these things.
How do you know that?
Because I'm a woman. I'm a woman. I know what we pick for. We like tall, handsome, good-looking men.
Is every married man tall, handsome, and good-looking?
Not every, but he's usually one of those things. He's usually one. Like he's usually either successful or handsome or good. Women don't marry homeless men off the street.
There's a big difference between tall, handsome, and successful and homeless. There's also average.
And so my point is, women tend to pick above average men. We see this on dating apps. Women swipe right 5% of the time. The number one way people are meeting under 30 is on dating apps.
That's because on dating apps,
but
3
you don't know
times
what you're talking about. You're not even out dating.
I do. Because on dating apps, Pearl, the reason that women are so choosy is because there are 3 to 4 times as many men on dating apps than women. So men will be constantly swiping right. Women can be more choosy in that environment because there's just so many more men. But in real life, when you look at a 1993 study, another one by Taylor and another one by Taylor done in 2011. I would like to finish. Before Taylor study in 2011 shows that men and women, when they get married, they tend to be within the same social range and attractiveness. So while for dating and hookups, you're correct. Women on social media apps, because there's so many men to pick from, go for the higher quality men. When it comes for marriage, people tend to marry within their own social and attractiveness value bracket.
Right, but that doesn't disprove what I'm saying. women pick a small percentage of men
No,
when given the choice.
That's not true, because
If
I'm talking
women are
about marriage.
If women,
We're talking about marriage, not Tinder.
if women, but that's the number one way people are meeting under 30. And that's the thing. Like a lot of you guys are so out of touch. You don't see, like, these studies take years to come out at some time. I can tell you firsthand what's going on because I actually talk to the people.
No, I agree. It's dumb to try to meet your spouse on Tinder. That's dumb.
Right, but that's what's happening.
Right.
That's where the world is going.
Right.
And you're encouraging men to clean up women's mess. And I say men shouldn't have to do that. Men shouldn't have to sign a contract where women are paid to leave. I think it's so simple. If people are paid to do the wrong thing, why wouldn't they do it? Why would, I'm not saying every woman will, but every woman can.
What woman is going to want to say, gee, you know what would be great?
Don't ask questions. Let her go.
Yeah. Well, I'll go. Well,
you can answer it, but don't ask her a question.
No, the women aren't saying, gee, it would be so awesome if I married this guy and then got full custody of the kids. So now I'm a single parent and I have to take care of these kids. Good thing he sends me $440 a month to help with that. That doesn't sound like a great deal to me.
$440 over 18 years is over $100K. That's life-changing money. That is life-changing. And this is the thing.
Try raising children on three kids on $440 a month.
And this is the thing. This is the other thing that you don't think of. Oh, this is the other thing. See, I'm not used to. I always have to write it down. You said that men don't fight for custody. This is the problem with men in statistics. This is the problem when people just read studies and they're not actually in the field. You don't know why. You don't know why men aren't fighting, because a lot of times men are in the position they cannot afford to fight for custody, and the lawyers will tell them not to do it because they spend $50,000. You know, I interviewed one guy, $1.5 million in Texas. $1.5 million on a divorce. He still didn't get primary custody. These cases are common. And if you spent a day in family court, if you actually were in the field, you would know.
Okay, so that's an anecdote, and it also doesn't say anything about marriage, because if a man hooks up with a woman or cohabits and she gets pregnant, he can have the same issues. So this is not unique to marriage.
Well, yeah, but marriage puts them at a higher risk because they're on the hook for alimony as well.
Alimony is only paid out in 8% of marriages.
I know, but what does a man get out of marriage that he doesn't get out of a live-in girlfriend? What benefit?
Well, he doesn't. One benefit, he's not a 45-year-old guy saying, "Can I bring my girlfriend to the party?"
Who cares?
One, he's not that. He's a mature, stable person.
Okay.
What does he get out of it? He lives
benefit?
longer. He's healthier.
No. What benefit does he get out of specifically signing that contract? What does he get? Women give children outside of marriage, so that he doesn't get that. The women gain weight after marriage. He doesn't get that. And all of the stats you're saying you're attributing to marriage, I would disagree.
Well,
I would say that women tend to marry happy, successful men.
That is just a correlative theory that you have, and that's not true, because if you just look around at men, and when you do longitudinal studies that control for success, you see that's not the case. One longitudinal study found that after a man gets married and upon the birth of his first child, he works 10 to 20 hours a week more than unmarried men.
Right, because women love spending men's money. Of course he's got to work more. Even car salesmen will tell you the final say is who? The woman.
It's because now he's grown up, Pearl. He's grown up and he realizes life isn't just about him. He has to take care of other people.
My wife's credit card spending is off the chain. And that's the thing. I am
Men
in the
have
field.
more credit card debt than women.
I am in the field. I am in the field. That's the thing.
What field? What expertise do you have in this?
Because when you actually interview the men that have gone through this, you have a completely different perspective. And that's the thing, because we just went through COVID. How many studies did they have? And experts that came out and said, COVID, you should take the shot. Oh, sorry, I don't want to YouTube you, but
you have 1 minute left.
But my entire point is you can make a study that says anything, but if you look at reality,
so studies are wrong except for the ones you cite for your positions.
If you look at reality, you would never sign a contract that someone is paid to leave, and there are just not enough wives to go around.
You have 40 seconds left. Feel free to ask him more questions.
No, I think that's it.
All right. No problem. All right, we've got 20 minutes. Again, you're asking the questions, you're responding to them.
All right.
We'll try not to talk over each other, just for the sake of those at home, as best as we're able. Ready, set, go.
Alrighty.
It's kind of fun.
It is fun. You'll get addicted to it after a while.
I was a little nervous, but it's kind of fun.
Then you get right into it, and it's just fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alrighty. We brought up something earlier about men. Do you think men and women have equal basic value, like equal dignity?
What do you mean by dignity?
They have the same intrinsic goodness. Men and women are equal in their basic value, their goodness as human beings.
Like I think that, because it depends, right? It depends how, like, I think that men do more good in society than women. And I'm assuming that's like the tweet you're talking about. But
no, I'm asking because earlier I said men and women are equal and you denied that. And I said, I agree that men and women are unequal in many ways, but surely, like, for example, do white and black people have equal dignity?
Yeah, sure.
Do men and women have equal dignity?
Sure.
Okay, good. That's really good to hear. All right. So you say marriage is a bad deal for men. For a marriage that does so, because a majority of marriages do not end in divorce. For the marriages, at least let's say this, for the marriages that don't end in divorce, are those bad deals for men?
If the wife gained a significant amount of weight, I would say bad deal. Most men don't want a fat wife, I would say. If the wife cheats, I would say bad deal. Most men don't want a cheating wife. If they're in a sexless marriage, I would say bad deal. Most men want, I think most men, if you said, hey guys, do you want to get married? Your wife isn't going to sleep with you after you have 2 children. They would say, oh, hell no.
What?
Oh, hell no.
Pearl,
So,
what would be the best, let's say a man says, I would like a long-term sexual relationship with a woman.
Okay.
What would you say is the best relationship kind for him to obtain that?
What do you mean by best?
If a guy says to you, Pearl, I would like a long-term sexual relationship with a woman, what kind of relationship should I pursue? Marriage, cohabitation, dating? Which would be the best strategy?
It depends on the state you're in, because some states have different states have different laws.
Just in general. Would you say?
Well, I don't. There's no general.
Fine.
No general answer because it would depend on the state.
Why would it? Because what you're saying is that the
like,
harm.
for example,
well, no, let me finish because
okay.
I get to interrupt now, and that's where it gets fun.
Go ahead.
Because what
Go ahead.
you're saying is, it's not. Even though the majority of marriages don't end in divorce, you still say those are a bad deal because women gain weight, even though men gain weight also. But
what about the men though?
Do men in long-term cohabiting relationships, do those women gain weight?
Not as much, but the difference is it's easier to get out of. So if a woman gains weight, it's much easier to break up with a girlfriend than it is a wife.
Okay.
So you're able to have higher standards.
How much weight can a woman gain in marriage before you consider her unmarriageable?
Depends on the guy. I think it's unfair more than like 20 pounds, 15 pounds. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you doing, ladies? Get on the treadmill.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay, and I think it's good for women. I think it is good for women if men have standards.
But according to that Gordon Larson study, cohabiting women gain. What was it?
The studies I've seen, it's 18.
Less. Less, but
I've seen around 10. I've seen 10.
That's the study you're citing for 24 pounds gain. They gain 18 pounds in marriage. The problem is, if you're saying that it's a bad deal for men to be in a relationship where women gain weight, and if women gain weight in all relationships, aren't you really just saying women are a bad deal for men, not marriage?
No, I'm saying that women, the difference is in a long-term relationship, you can say you need to change or I'm going to go. And women tend to act better when men have standards.
Okay. Do you agree that married men rate themselves? Do married men live longer than unmarried men?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so that's
because I think women tend to pick healthier men.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a woman. We want, I mean, why do you think women are throwing themselves at these like NBA player? We want the good genes.
Are most men who get married not NBA players?
No, but you can see when you look at the men that women are throwing themselves at, you can see what women select for.
Okay. So, but you would agree though that even if that is correct, even if it's correct that women choose men who are happier and healthier, if a man chooses to get married, then that would seem that he is or has made himself to be a happy, healthy individual.
Yeah.
Right?
If he gets successfully
marries.
Can you say the question
If a man successfully marries a woman, does that mean he has become a happy and healthy individual?
Not because of the marriage,
no,
but she was probably selected because he was that type of person.
So he's made himself into that kind of a person. He's disciplined himself. He's, made himself at least somewhat successful, happy and healthy. Okay, good. So he becomes that.
I wouldn't attribute it to marriage, though. But I would attribute it to I think men are going to do what they're going to do. They're on a mission.
On average, though, does marriage take that away from men, their happiness and their health?
I would say yes. I would say there are more men in unhappy marriages than happy. Out of the original 100 that got married.
Do you have a
so okay, if you take the I'm answering the question.
Go ahead. Sure.
You want
That's fine.
So the study you're talking about, 35%. I've heard that's a bit dishonest. I've heard it's more 50%, 45% of marriages end in divorce. The last one was from 2023. I know it was a little off because of COVID, but I think if you include sexless marriages, women that belittle their husband, that's really common. Women that make fun of their husbands in public.
Then you're taking it away from my main point. So you're claiming that these happy, healthy men who get married, the majority of them, they lose their happiness. Do you have a study that shows that? Because let me finish. Okay. I have cited the General Social Survey, the Gallup surveys, hundreds of thousands of people who are tracked, Harvard Adult Study, 80 years, that married men rate themselves as happier and healthier. And
right,
the majority of them do.
But you're attributing that to marriage.
I'm not. I'm just saying, what I'm saying is that even if marriage is negative in some ways, it doesn't take that away from them. You're making the claim that the majority of married men aren't happy, but you have no study to back that up.
I'm saying that you can back it up when you look at 40%. Let's say 40% of marriages end in divorce. Okay, 40%. Now you have 6 left. A quarter of them are sexless. Boom, that's over 50.
That's not true. A quarter are not.
There you go. Women on average, and then on average, so at least half of the women gain 25 pounds.
I'm going to ask you another question. I'm going to ask you another question again. So we do surveys, and we ask people if they're happy. And I've cited multiple studies, okay, where hundreds of thousands of married men are asked if they are happy. Okay. And the majority, 80% to 90%, say yes. Can you cite a study that shows that the majority of men in marriage say they're not happy?
Well, you're saying in marriage. I'm including divorced.
Sure. That's
my point. But my original statement was...
and I'm going to interrupt because it's my turn. My original question was, for marriage, since the majority of marriages don't end in divorce, and if divorce is the only bad thing, then marriage is a good deal. Setting that aside... You cannot show that married men are unhappy. You have no data for that.
But I also added in, I said if a woman gains weight, that's a bad deal. If a woman cheats, that's a bad deal.
Do the men say it's not worth it? But do the men say it's not worth it to them? And they leave?
You asked what I would classify as a successful marriage. Or I made the premise.
The debate is not whether Pearl thinks marriage is a bad deal.
You said I could make the premise.
Yeah, but
I said a good deal is classified as a woman that stays in shape, F's her husband, and stays married and is obedient. Okay. So if she's not having sex with her husband and she's gaining weight,
who should determine?
That's 60%. At least half of them are doing that.
Who should we look to determine the standard of whether marriage is a good? Let me finish. Whether marriage is a good deal. Married men or Pearl Davis?
I think you should look at men and what they're choosing, and they're not choosing marriage. Because if it was a good deal, it would be an easy sell. Good products get sold.
Is exercise
good products?
Is exercise a good deal? Or is exercising a good deal?
Exercising is a good deal, but
most people sign up for it?
I wouldn't say those are the same thing. Because again, if women were benefiting men, like they were 100 years ago, if we look at 100 years ago, men signed up for marriage within 3 months. That's all it took.
All right, here's my next question. Here's my next question. If marriage is so bad, including people who end in divorce.
I didn't say all marriage is bad.
Okay. If in general marriage,
I said out of 151 will fail.
If it's more likely, if it's greater than not, that marriage, it will be bad. And if that's the case, why do 65% of divorced men get married again, even though they've already been through a marriage that's failed? If it's so bad, Pearl, why do the majority of men get married again?
Well, I would say, people don't always make logical decisions when it comes to love. But my question would go back to, why aren't men signing up in general?
Okay, so anybody who just disagrees with your standard of marriage, they're just being illogical?
No.
Okay.
I said a good deal. I clarified it in the beginning. I said good deal, doesn't gain weight, sleeps with her husband, stays married. I think that's the bare minimum.
Why can't this be a good deal for marriage if a married man says that he's happy?
Because I don't think that I think happiness studies, like how do they measure it?
You literally ask the person if they're happy.
Yeah, people lie.
Okay, so it's just a giant conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy.
Okay, so do you think most men who are married are unhappy?
I think most men that sign up for marriage out of the original, not stay married, that sign up for marriage, 51 are unhappy with that original deal. And we can agree at least 40% divorce, right?
Yeah, there's a 40%.
Okay.
But
so what percent of men rate themselves as happy?
You don't get to ask the questions.
Fine.
I get to ask them. And as I said before, just because a marriage ends in divorce, it doesn't mean that person now thinks that marriage is a bad deal, since the majority of men who get divorced choose to go back and get married anyways. I want to go back to some of the different...
Why don't the majority of men sign up for marriage?
You don't get to ask. I'm going to go back here.
Because if it was such a good deal, they'd sign up.
Yeah, well...
Good products get sold. You think Elon Musk is running out of his cars.
Okay.
When they first came out anyways. I don't know about now, but I heard that truck was bad.
All right. Let's see here, because you've brought up...
80% of women get HPV. That's crazy.
Okay. What percent of men get HPV?
Similar, but they're only the sexually active ones, and there's a higher percent of sexually active women.
Yeah, I guess I'll start asking these questions. Do men have a lot of STDs?
A smaller, they're at a lower rate than women.
How do you know that?
You can Google it. CDC.
Okay, but still, do the majority of men have STDs who are unmarried, sexually active?
Well, if they're sexually active, but the minority, this is the thing. You guys don't know what's going on because you guys have been out of the game so long. The number one way that people are meeting is dating apps. Women swipe right 5, 10, up to 20% of the time. What does that mean?
Okay.
A minority of men can even sleep around. Okay. So when you guys are saying men stop sleeping around, a minority of men even get the choice to do that.
Do men cheat?
Yeah.
Okay. So if a man cheats and he leaves his wife to be with another woman, is it fair that he should have to compensate her by paying for things like child support now that he's abandoned her?
Is he going to be an active father? One thing. So
I'm going to ask the question again. If a man is married to a woman, they have 3 kids, and he says, wow, I'd like to be married to this other lady instead that I had an affair with, and he abandons his wife and children, and his wife has been raising these kids, and now they're on their own. Isn't it just that he should compensate them for putting them in that position by paying child support?
How many kids? How old?
Let's say 3 kids, 3, 6, and 9.
3, 6, and 9. And he completely abandoned them, not even...
So he tells the wife, you can have full custody of the kids. I want to go and get remarried. Shouldn't he have to support them since he was an awful person and abandoned them and put them in this position?
You know what? Sorry. No, I don't believe in child support. I don't believe in alimony. I think it's equal. Women have fought. We have fought for equality. Okay. We have fought for equality. We got it. So now you get a job like everyone else. It's a sad situation, but overwhelmingly, men aren't the ones doing that. Women, there are far more deadbeat moms than deadbeat dads.
Do you think you simp for men?
No.
So you don't call it simping for men and saying that that if a woman does something bad, she should have to pay consequences for it. But if a man, I'm going to finish. Okay. If a man abandons his family because he wants to screw some other lady and puts them into poverty, you're saying he shouldn't have to spend a dime on that. Why?
Equality, baby, because women abandon their families all the time and they're not punished, they're rewarded. So I say equal rights, equal lefts. You guys fought for equality, here it is.
Then shouldn't the answer be that instead of saying both men and women should be allowed to be awful people, shouldn't we say men and women should both be held to higher standards?
I would say, I don't, it depends what you mean by higher standards, but what I would say is I don't think we should have child support. I don't think we should have alimony. I think it's wrong.
Even if a man he just leaves, his wife has been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, 3 kids, She has been out of the workplace, going to have a difficult time finding a job. And I know personally women that this has happened to, and he leaves and goes has sex with someone else. We're not talking about other women being bad. You're saying in that case, the man shouldn't be compelled to provide for the family he abandoned.
Well, I would say for the same case that if women cheat and leave for another husband, they shouldn't have alimony or child support either. I'm saying in both cases we should not have alimony.
Let me
and
ask you another
child
question.
support.
Let's say you have.
Let me ask you this. I don't believe in paying people to make wrong decisions.
Okay.
I don't believe in that.
All right. So if a woman, let's say you have a stay-at-home dad, successful woman, has been out, she's boss girl.
Can she be a lawyer?
Sure. She's the boss girl lawyer, turns into the She-Hulk when she needs to, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And she's making a lot of money, and then she leaves her husband and kids, says, "Hey, Frank, you can have the kids. I'm going to run off with this other lawyer at the office." And now he and the kids are in poverty. Do you think that she should have to pay child support to them?
Nope. I think he should get a job.
Okay.
And so should she.
So you don't believe? Do you believe in marriage at all?
I believe. What kind of marriage? I don't believe in marriage as it is today.
What?
If we tomorrow got rid of child support, got rid of alimony, got rid of all these incentives for bad decisions, fine. Then I would have no problem. But my issue is, one, the quality of women is lower than ever before.
Pearl,
the risk is higher, and women are paid to
Pearl,
leave.
what is marriage?
One person for a lifetime, and the woman submits to her husband and is an obedient for a lifetime.
Okay.
But I am not, and see, I guess my head goes in a couple directions, because the other thing is, today it's nothing.
Okay.
Today, you said the average marriage is longer than 7 years. Let's say it's 12 years.
The median length is 21 years.
The average, let's say 21. That's still not a lifetime. And a quarter of divorces are gray divorces. So it happens when people are in their 50s and 60s. So that's the other thing about these stats. It doesn't predict who in the future gets divorced. It says today. So it doesn't include people that are separated. I know couples in their 50s and 60s. They've been separated for years. They're still counted as married. So. My issue again is marriage as it is today, and I just think you would never sign a contract that pays somebody to leave. I think it's super logical. If someone's paid to do the wrong thing, they're going to do it. And what are women doing?
Okay.
They're leaving. I'm so shocked.
If marriage is a lifelong union, and let's say a woman does what you say she should do, right?
I don't say women should do anything.
Well, you say women should be obedient to their husbands, right?
If the woman gets married, but
if
some
a woman
women,
gets married, should she stay home and raise the kids, Pearl? If she,
well, it depends, and I can't give you a straight answer. Like I can't give you a straight answer. It depends. What does he want?
Let's say he wants her to stay home and raise kids.
Fine, then yeah, sure.
And you think that that's a reasonable thing? So
the majority of women aren't. That's not the majority, and that's the thing that.
No, let me finish. So if a woman does that, then she takes a significant amount of risk, right? She makes herself. Does she take risk in choosing to become financially dependent on one person?
Yes, she does, but women aren't choosing that. That's a funny thing. Women are having 1 to 2 children. They're in public school. So let's not act like these women are home housewifing it up. Okay. These kids are in public school for 8 hours a day.
You're right. Men and women. They aren't choosing marriage. Both of them aren't.
True. But didn't you say men are in control of marriage? That's what you said earlier.
Yeah. So really, it's more they're not choosing to do it. Right.
Exactly. And women aren't choosing because women are not wives today.
Okay.
Man up and marry these whores.
You got 1 minute left.
Okay. Do you think that men are marriageable who've looked at pornography?
Yeah.
How about men who have helped run the camera at OnlyFans?
What % of men do that, Trent?
No, I'm asking you the question.
This is come on.
I'm asking you a question.
Who have run the camera? Personally, not for me. Run the camera at OnlyFans.
All right, we only have a few seconds left, so I'm just going to take it back to the main thing, the final main question.
Okay.
Okay. Do just a yes or no. Do the majority, 80% of men who are married, say they are happy? Yes or no?
They say it, but we don't know if they're telling the truth.
Okay.
All right, we are going to go into a time of Q&A, in which we'll take questions from our local supporters and from super chatters. What do y'all think? Since we have so many questions, would 2 minutes
That's fine.
each be a good idea? Just so, and it can be less than that, but it might be a good idea just to keep it to that. All right. Okay, so here's my first question, and I'll ask you first, Pearl, and then Trent. And you can take up to 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. Do your best job summarizing his position in a way that sounds convincing. Like, I want to see that you've understood his position, and then I'm going to give you a chance to articulate her position to see if you've understood hers. You go first.
Trent believes that men should just man up and marry these whores.
That was a great steel man, Paul.
I don't know if is that how he'd say it?
No, I mean, he said that they shouldn't disqualify women for having STDs. They shouldn't disqualify women for having abortions.
I'm not asking you to argue against him. I'm asking you, can you understand his position and say it? Because it seems to me that if I can't articulate my opponent's position, that's a good sign that I haven't understood it. So I'm trying to see, do you understand what's his position?
I understand his position perfectly. Sure. He believes there are a bunch of studies that say that men are happier in marriage, and marriage makes men happier and better people.
Okay. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Is that
and men should not disqualify for abortions, STDs, and being a whore.
Okay, so do you want to respond to, is that a good summary or?
No, of course it's not a good summary.
Well, why don't you sum up her position as best as you can then?
Sure. Pearl thinks marriage is a bad deal because sometimes women gain 15 pounds in the 70 years that they're married, and guys should be able to run for the hills because that's the worst thing in the world.
Is that basically it?
No.
Okay. All right. Question here from Catholic Viking from over on Locals. And Thursday, you want to throw up some super chats on the screen here? I love when he calls me boss man. I feel so important. Catholic Viking, so we'll start with Trent. Trent, is there a point in debating marriage outside the Catholic sacrament? And if so, how do you accomplish that when it can mean whatever that person defines it as? Feels like what is a woman type of question, and we need to define marriage as the sacrament. You go first, and then you'll have 2 minutes as well. Go.
Yeah. So marriage is something that God gave the human race. It was created with Adam and Eve, our first parents. So marriage is not a uniquely Catholic thing. That's why when the government tries to change marriage to make so-called same-sex marriage, that's wrong, because the government can't change what marriage is any more than it can change what friendship or justice is. Marriage is a natural institution. Nearly every society on earth has discovered it for the good of men and women and the children that proceed from their unions. So marriage is a natural institution. The Catholic Church recognizes that if someone in Pacific Islands or in another country, if they enter into a monogamous, ideally lifelong, sexually exclusive union, then we call that marriage and we recognize it. And it's better for societies that have marriage, because this is better for the children that proceed from those unions than it is for anything else.
All right.
Can you repeat the question?
I could if I wasn't desperately looking up other questions while I asked that and have thereby forgotten. No, it's not your fault. So this person's asking whether there's any point to even debating marriage outside of the sacrament, because people define marriage however they want to. So if we're going to be debating marriage, shouldn't we figure out that we both agree on what it is before we debate it? He's like, how do you accomplish it when it can mean whatever a person defines it?
I think that's a problem I come to, because people look at it from a religious point of view, and I'm coming from a legal point of view. So
I would also add, just as a non-Catholic and a non-Christian can know what a woman is from reason alone, they can know what marriage is from reason alone.
All right, I'll ask Pearl this question.
Then why do they keep saying gay marriage? Like, that's legal now.
Because people often don't act reasonably, or they don't think
it's
well.
Unreasonable. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this question is from Tony. He says, Pearl, do you see a difference between a woman who has no regret for current digressions versus one who has repented, that is, from current porn, and unrepentant versus repentant and regretful? So, in other words, is there a difference between a woman who's screwed up in the past and doesn't regret it, doesn't repent of it, and then there are people who've screwed up in the past, we've all made mistakes. And
when it comes for if I phrase the question as if my brother was to date, if I was recommending my brother date someone, I don't think it would matter. I think that if you really want what's best for a guy, you want him to have high standards for his wife.
Trent, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think that people should choose to marry the best person for them, and choose to marry someone who has a good chance of being in a lifelong union. But not all of us, people make mistakes in their lives. But when it comes, so for example, large majorities of men look at pornography and have sex outside of marriage. that harms their future chances in marriage, but not irreparably. A much tinier percentage of women do things like be on OnlyFans, and that also harms their chances in a future marriage, but not irreparably.
I get a question because it seems like, and this is to you, and I'll get a question for you. Pearl seems to be saying, like, you're just out of touch, like you're old, like you don't understand what it's like today. So maybe that was true for you back in the late 90s or the early 2000s, that women were marriageable, they were better. But isn't it possible that you are out of touch and that she's right just today? I mean, why don't you ask young men, and have you asked young men? Maybe they would agree with Pearl.
Sure, and when you look at studies and you look at young men who have gotten married and who stay married, they do say that women are marriageable. What Pearl is doing here is that if you create so high of a standard that no woman can meet it, you've just created
Don't have an abortion?
Hold on, you've
You
created,
can respond in a
you've
minute.
you've created an arbitrary standard, and it's also sexist if you don't apply the same standards to men, such as don't marry a man who has actively or passively supported an abortion, which is going to be the same percentage as women involved in abortions. I'm saying to treat men and women equally in this regard. And we do see that there's, if what Pearl's doing is the reverse of a radical feminist who says, oh, men are terrible, men are awful, look at all these awful, terrible things that men do, and say there's no good men out there. That's not true. There's plenty of good men out there. You just have an anti-male standard to exclude them. And that's the same for people who try to do the same, to say that marriage is bad because of women.
I don't think it's crazy for men to ask for an in-shape woman that didn't have an abortion, STD, or debt. I don't think that's crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't.
I don't. No tattoos. I don't think that's crazy. No
But I don't
porn.
think you're saying it's crazy.
And I would say
And-
that
and
to make it a deal breaker, that you're going to pick any mistake a person makes, what you're doing is the same as a woman who says, it's not crazy for me to say, I want to marry a man who makes six figures and has a six-pack. That
No,
you
I
might
would not say those are the
No,
same.
because
I
you're
would not
saying,
say those are the same.
Can a woman say she wants a guy who is in shape and has a good job?
Fine.
Okay, so
That's
then we
no
have
problem.
to, yeah, and then I would say that a man. So can a man be in shape if he's 15 pounds overweight?
I would say in shape is the BMI scale. So for the most part, and visceral fat, that's what you got to look at.
Okay. Do you think most middle-aged guys are
I
are
think,
muscly, or they got a little fat?
I
on
think
them?
again we're going back to what do men get out of marriage? I don't think it's crazy for men to say, I don't want a woman that's had an STD, an abortion, or debt.
But
or
real quick,
tattoo.
I don't think you think it's crazy either, right?
So
Like,
and by
Well,
that
let me-
logic,
yeah.
by that logic, there would not be enough wives to go around.
I would say
in
that
the next generation.
It's unreasonable, because if you applied the same standard and say for women, it's reasonable for women to not want a man who has an STD or has looked at pornography or has been involved in abortion procedures, then there wouldn't be any men later. Both men and women aren't in great shape today. You're trying to make it sound like it's all women's fault. What I'm saying is just people's fault, and we need each other.
Can I ask you a question now? Trent, I thought, brought up a good point earlier when he said, sure, okay, I'm willing to accept that women are in a way worse state today than they may have been 50 years ago, but that's also true of dudes. And so couldn't it just be the case that both men and women, in some respects, may be much worse than they were 50 years ago?
I would say that men are more marriageable than women today. I would say that most men have jobs and most men are not sleeping around like that. I wouldn't say that porn is as detrimental to a marriage as you're saying.
If a man looks at violent pornography, is he still marriageable?
Women look at violent pornography more than men.
No, I'm asking the question. Do
Women
you think
look at 50 Shades of Grey, all that stuff. That's the other thing. Women look at pornography at a much higher rate than people really are willing to.
is it higher than men?
I wouldn't say higher than men, but violent pornography women look at more. I'm positive.
Do you don't think men look at violent pornography more?
Not as much as women.
Do you
No,
have a-
not
do you have a
violent.
study to back that up?
Not off the top.
Or is that
of
just
not,
something
not,
Pearl made
not,
up?
No, not off the top of my head. You can look it up though.
All right, just so this doesn't go off the rails, I'm going to
But
start
you can
taking
look at
some
50.
questions
You can look
here.
at 50 Shades of Grey. That was like one of the biggest grossing movies.
All right, so this question's for you. Eleazar Palmer, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, I work with young adults daily at Catholic University. Pearl, can you give one argument that is not anecdotal or subjective as to why marriage is not the move for young people?
I would say because for women, it's beneficial. For women, sure. But for men, because women are paid to leave. Simple.
You want to respond?
Well, I don't understand. Well, wasn't the question about men, why men should not get married?
Can you scroll back up?
No, it says why. You says young people.
Yeah, just stay on until
It
the
said
end.
young people.
All
So
right,
I
but-
said for women, it's
Okay,
women.
but here's this question is also for Trent. Trent, why aren't young people getting married?
Why? That's a sociological question, so there's a lot of different elements to it. One, why aren't they getting married? The marriage rate has been decreasing. One reason I would say is because people fill their heads with anti-marriage propaganda. Like if you tell people over and over again, half of all marriages fail, half of all marriages fail, when that's not true, the majority of marriages last a lifetime, they think that they're not going to make it. So they've imbibed a cultural attitude that's anti-marriage. Also, frankly, so there's a lot of men, I mean, back in the day, well, to put it crudely, no one buys the cow if you can get the milk for free. So, I mean, for men, most of the time, if they wanted to have a sexual encounter with a woman, they married a woman or they paid for a prostitute. Now, through the rise of online pornography, other elements like that, you have a lot of men who had a failure to launch. They're not getting jobs. They're not getting discipline. They're looking at porn every day, including violent porn. And so they're not becoming the men the women need them to be for marriage. We also have difficult economic issues right now. People are delaying marriage to get more advanced degrees. Though I will say that if you're college educated, you have one of the lowest risks of divorce.
One thing I think I might be sympathetic to what Pearl is saying is it seems like many men, especially in the conservative kind of Christian movement, we're very comfortable criticizing men. You know, your failure to launch, you're a slob, get yourself in shape, but we seem less likely.
Oh, no.
Well, and this.
Can you scroll down just a touch? He's saying.
Scoot back this way. You're in Matt's shot.
Oh, sorry.
I also,
sorry.
well, I think also,
so I wanted to ask you
men and women. So I would say that women, for example, men and women both think there's many things I want to pursue in my 20s and 30s before I get married down. And I would encourage both of them. That is not a good strategy. A better strategy is to get vocational, technical, or college education, get stable employment, and get married probably around in your mid-20s.
Are you willing to criticize women today, younger women?
Well, a lot of women are overly picky. So they'll, just as what Pearl is saying, you know,
men should have standards.
You know, if they have standards. Women have extremely high standards, saying that men have to get an exorbitantly high income. They look at a relationship like, oh, he needs to have this certain height, or he needs to have. So just as what Pearl was saying, I would say that just as unreasonable for Pearl to say married men have to demand a woman not gain 15 pounds in their marriage, it's unreasonable for women to say, I'm not going to marry a guy unless he's 6 foot tall, unless he makes 6 figures.
Unless he looks like Thursday.
Rather, what we should look for is the person virtuous? Is the person someone
Isn't being fat gluttony?
Is it being fat gluttony?
Isn't that gluttony?
No, people can be fat without being gluttonous, and they can be gluttonous without being fat. They're not the same thing.
Do you want to scroll to another question, Thursday? He does. All right. Okay, this person, let's see, Shauna Rencher, thank you so much. Research shows marriage matters to kids with more resources and improved outcomes for kids. Healthy kids become healthy adults. If you want suitable adults, shouldn't you make them in the environment proven to do that? Marriage. Do you want to go?
I don't disagree with that if the laws aren't paying women to leave. And that's the problem. You're going to get the same outcomes we got last generation and the generation before that with every round of people that gets married, and it's just going to be less and less. So you will not have that outcome until you switch the laws.
If the laws were changed how you would like them to be changed, do you think marriage would then be a better deal for men?
Yeah, that's my whole point.
And so what should be changed to make that the case?
There should be no alimony, no child support, 50-50 custody off the bat.
All right. So if that was changed tomorrow, all of a sudden would you be, okay, yeah,
fine.
Go get men.
Fine.
What do you think about that if that's your main point?
Yeah, it's just the laws today, it's crazy. People have no idea how disadvantaged men are in the court system. So if that was changed today, yeah, fine.
What I would say is we can always improve things like child custody cases, family court. Just because something can always be improved, it doesn't follow that it's so bad we should have nothing to do with it now. Higher education can certainly be improved, but people who get college degrees tend to be better off than people who don't. So it's still a smart move for people to go and get one. So just because something can be improved doesn't mean it's so bad you shouldn't take part in it now. So for men, if you want to have a sexual relationship with a woman, which children can come from, you're much better off being married than being unmarried, because you still have all of these custody issues, but you come from the weaker position of being unmarried. And if you say, well, I'm just going to stay away from women entirely, you risk growing up to be a never married man, because women are the ones who create most of the social connections for men. Most of my friends are because my wife gets me my friends. That's how wives work a lot of the time. But if you're a never married man, you risk growing to be old, reclusive, unhealthy, and more at risk of suicide.
But again, the women don't want to get married. That I just gave you. If they polled, this is the book of Numbers. So they polled millennial women and Gen Z women.
That's that one. Yeah, the book.
Wait. Listen.
Yes,
listen.
I
It's
read
like,
that book.
wait.
Yeah, I read. Go ahead.
So I'm saying they polled women on this, and they did not rate men as high in their priority list. And if we just look, even outside of that, you look in the real world, women have the most choice to get married at 22. We're not picking it.
All right, we got a question here from Nathaniel, who's a local supporter. I'm laughing because I've got a gigantic green bottle and I realize how ridiculous that looks. But he says, for Pearl, how do you consider yourself Catholic when you go against the church's teaching on the sanctity of marriage and the wrongness of adultery? Do you consider yourself Catholic?
Yeah, I'm Catholic.
Do you accept all the things the Catholic? Sorry, I'll let you.
Do you think adultery is sinful?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I don't think that I think it is a bad deal if you are signing a contract that the other party is paid to leave. That's my opinion.
Right. So your opinion isn't that marriage is bad. Your opinion is that given the current law,
the current law and the quality of the women are so low that it is a bad deal for men.
And I would say that what is a better deal? Having some extra money and being alone and miserable when you're old years, or possibly having less money but a greater chance of having a family, children, and a fulfilling life?
Well, I wouldn't say those are the two choices, because option C, again, is men committing suicide. That is, or men being financially wrecked at 45, getting to see. I mean,
sure,
think about.
Never married men are more likely to be
let me finish.
Financially well off and suicidal.
Let me finish. And think about that. It's normal for men to see their kids every other weekend. That's normal. Men aren't picking this. They just look at the field.
And that's not
they
true.
They look at the field and they say this is too expensive and too hard of a fight.
Does that happen for the majority of marriages?
That happens to a significant enough
to the majority.
That happens to a significant enough amount of marriages that I would say it's too risky. If let's say I had a 2 out of 100 chance of being financially ruined and had my kids stolen from me, I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
I think that's too.
So what's the option as a faithful Catholic? If you think it's a bad deal for men to get married today, is it okay for a man to fornicate?
Well,
by that I mean sex outside of marriage.
He still has custody issues.
From the Catholic point of view, no, but most people aren't religious.
But I'm saying from your point of view, as a Catholic, do you believe that sex outside of marriage is wrong?
I didn't come here to debate religion.
That's fine.
That's what I said when I came here. I'm not here to debate religion. I'm here to debate.
Does a man who has sex with women? Does a man who has sex with women risk creating children and being financially ruined?
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying, it's not unique to marriage. You're just saying sex with women is a bad deal.
No.
Yeah, is sex with women a bad deal?
Depends how it ends, I guess.
So that's true for marriage. Depends how it ends.
Well, but I'm saying in sex, men can do things to protect themselves. So they can, and I'm not advising this. I'm just saying there are options. Men can wear condoms. Men can get vasectomies.
Okay.
Right? So I'm not saying they should. People get mad. I'm not saying they should, but there are options for men to protect themselves.
Okay, but that's still not unique to marriage, because there's married men who use marriage.
But my only point is when the man signs the marriage contract, there's another there's another layer of there's another layer of legal issues that he goes through. We can put on the hook for alimony on top of that.
Do unmarried men pay child support?
Yeah, some of them do.
Okay, so it sounds like your argument is not that marriage is a bad deal, it's sex is a bad deal.
No, that's not my argument. My argument is that there's nothing men, from a legal point of view, get out of marriage that they can't get out of a live-in girlfriend. Like, why does it even have to be with the state?
When men, they do get a legal benefit, do we presume that the married husband is the father of the children? He gets the presumption of paternity.
It depends on the state.
That's pretty universal, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so he does have natural rights to his. Does a married man have rights to his children? Unmarried men don't.
But I'll tell you what the issue with that is. So, and the stats on this people will dispute, but 5% to up to 1% to a third of men are raising kids that aren't theirs.
That is absolutely not true.
And again, people dispute it because they'll say that the paternity test centers aren't. That's not a representative sample. But even if it's 1 out of 100, that's one too many. And so the issue you get without mandatory DNA testing is many men are raising kids that aren't theirs. In California, if over the age of 2, he's assumed to have paternity, he is still on the hook for child support for 10, 16 years, however old it is.
When is a man more at risk of paternity fraud, in marriage or outside of marriage?
My point is that it's another layer of risk and there's no benefit.
I need to wrap up because
Yeah,
we've
go
got
ahead.
so many questions here.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
respect the people who've been paying money here. So this person says, Pearl, have your views affected your family history? Do your parents fit the statistics you mention? Where your mother would consider it good to divorce your father? Do you see your own future having marriage? So choose a question. I guess there's like 3 there.
How did your views? No, my parents are still married. They've been married for 30 years. I know.
Good deal for your dad? Good deal for your dad?
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah?
Good deal.
It was for him?
But exceptions don't make the rule. And I, I come from a very like privileged background, I would say.
Do you see future
So-
in your own? Do you see your marriage in your future? Do you want to get
If-
married one day?
Yeah, if he wants to. So, but I don't see it as a necessity.
New questions Thursday.
Do you think
Sorry,
you're,
Dad.
do you think if you marry a guy and you put on 15 or 20 pounds in like 20 years, he should
I hope he'd.
he's fine
I
leaving?
hope he'd leave, and then I would get on the treadmill,
Okay.
and then I would get on the treadmill to get him back.
Tony G said, "Oh, do you know?"
You know what? That's the easiest problem to solve, ladies. Why are we getting mad about that?
Tony G says,
That is
"Pearl,
completely in your control.
Do you
Go
think
ahead.
husbands should promise to love their wives for richer or poor, in sickness and in health, till death do them part?
Look, I'm not. Again, you're going back to the religious point of view.
No,
I'm
that's
talking about
not
the
religious.
legal-
That's just
I'm talking
basic
about
what
the
marriage
legal point
should
of view.
marriage be.
Well, yeah, and that's.
Yeah, that wasn't a religious question.
Yeah, that's just in marriage. Do we
it
promise for richer or poor, in sickness and in health?
Right. Fine. Yes, but women should also be obedient.
All right, guys. I'm going to set a new rule and be more strict about it.
No, I'm having fun.
Good. I'm going to ask a question, and whoever answers first gets 2 minutes and only 2 minutes, and then the next person gets and then 1 minute to respond. And I'm going to be unflinchingly rigid in this. Okay, so where are we at Thursday? Here's a question. So this is for Pearl, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer. Pearl, do you think you yourself are unmarriageable? Do you think you yourself are a bad deal for men? And if not, then wouldn't it be more productive to encourage women to be those things?
No, I don't think I'm unmarriageable, but I don't need it as a necessity. I don't mind like girlfriend long term. That's fine.
The next question is though, shouldn't you just encourage women to be like you, since you're marriageable?
No, I think there's better women you could learn from too. So I would, yeah.
But why not spend your time? I guess this person's saying encouraging women to be the sorts of traits that you believe yourself to possess.
Because I don't think that women will, regardless, based on what I've seen.
Okay, Trent, you got a minute to respond.
I believe that men and women are both capable of making change. And I think, Pearl, especially if you go on to marriage and show people you can be hardworking, faithful, and virtuous, I would encourage men and women to seek out a role model. I would encourage them not to think of marriage through the lens of the worst stories you hear on YouTube and Reddit, but to look at marriage through the lens of role models you have in your own community of marriages that have worked, see what works for them, what they've done with communication strategies. In fact, when a survey of divorced people, only 5% of them said that the marriage was unsalvageable. 95% said if things had been done differently, divorce would not have been needed. So
Right,
I would
10
say,
seconds.
learn from those who've made marriage work, and you have a good chance of being
So we
happy.
should
All right,
ask the
next
women why they
question
keep
is for
leaving.
Trent, and then you can respond.
yeah.
So was Michael Knowles in his debate with Pearl correct that a prenup always necessarily invalidates Catholic marriage? Is it wrong for Catholics to minimize the provisions and incentives for divorce already present in normal marriage law via prenup? 2 minutes.
I don't know what Michael said in the debate, so I can't comment directly on that. But I will say that prenuptial agreements are they're not universally condemned in Catholicism. They can still be allowed. So for example, in some cases where you have a man, a Brady Bunch scenario, where you have a man with children from a previous marriage, a woman with children from a previous marriage, you might use a prenuptial agreement to figure out other kinds of custody issues and family issues in in a less common marriage situation like that. So that can be done. I would, however, strongly advise against that. Going into marriage thinking, well, I'm just going to protect the life that I have and treat my spouse as an accessory that can be removed easily when necessary. That is a attitude for a failed marriage, because that's not what marriage is. Marriage is about creating one life. So for example, people who have joint bank accounts, they're less likely to divorce than people who have separate bank
I have a
accounts.
question.
All right, so you're
Can
done with
can I
that?
ask
Yep.
a question?
Well, sure, but
Do you think
you
if a
got
man,
1 minute,
it's really
so
quick.
go.
Do you think if the man wants a prenup, that his wife should obey him and sign it?
If he wants a prenup, they're not married yet, so she's not under the marital obedience rule yet.
Okay, but if she wants to be married, should she obey him and sign it?
she should be obedient to things that are within reason, and many prenuptial agreements would be unreasonable.
This question is for Pearl. Pearl, why don't you come at this from a religious perspective? You claim to be Catholic. But just so you know, I'm happy to leave out Catholic questions from now on if you don't want to address them.
Because I think it doesn't apply to society at large. Because I'm talking about what's going on in society, and I'm not trying to attack marriage from a religious point of view. I'm trying to attack the laws. That's my issue.
Then I actually agree. I'm fine talking about this outside of a religious context because marriage is a human institution. It's created by God, but so is justice and other kinds of natural goods. So God created marriage, human beings God made marriage like he made math, and every culture's discovered it. And so it's up to cultures to refine it and to make it better and to avoid things that make it worse.
Purple Suit Man says, Pearl, aren't you a Catholic? How do you reconcile your faith with your position? Trent and Pearl, should your faith influence your decision to get married?
Yes, I'm Catholic, but I still think the laws are unfavorable to men, and I have seen Catholic women ruin men in divorce court. I've seen Christian women, Jewish women, Buddhist women. I've seen it across religions, and I don't tend to see much of a difference. There's no Catholic woman in divorce court. Many women believe one thing when they get married, and then they believe another thing 20 years later.
And I would say that that's as I mentioned earlier, excuse me, that's the anecdote fallacy and the comparison fallacy. Just because bad things happen to some people, it doesn't mean that that thing is bad for a majority of people. And the comparison fallacy, just because there's bad things associated with one choice, that doesn't mean that it's a bad deal, because the other choice could be a worse deal. Bad things statistically are more likely to happen to people who cohabit and can have these same things happen to them, or men who just ignore women for the rest of their lives and become never married and die prematurely from suicide, from unhealthy individuals.
Like, would you consider priests that?
Priests are,
because by your logic, they would be they would have a terrible life.
Priests are at greater risk of having depression and other things like that, so greater care has to be taken with them. But not everybody. But that's why only people who are called to priesthood should pursue it, whereas the majority of men aren't called to that. They're probably called to marriage.
Vinnie Cox says, Pearl, as a woman who I'm reading it from the local supporter. Pearl, as a woman who campaigns for the general disregarding of female prominence, what is to stop you from taking your own advice and being quiet finally? Where is your husband? Why are you so disagreeable, abrasive, and unpleasant while lamenting the very same traits in other women?
I'm actually quite polite, so... yeah.
And to stick up for Pearl here, I think her position is that women should be agreeable to their husbands. They might be disagreeable with people they're not married to.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty agreeable in real life,
Sure,
but it's a debate,
fine.
you know.
Yeah.
Rod asks, Trent, if women should be submissive to their husbands, and you agree to this, do you agree that men should be able to discipline their wives?
I don't know what that means. From the outset, when I hear that, that sounds very pejorative, like you're treating your spouse like a child. I think that husbands and wives should treat each other like people, like adult people. And so if you have a disagreement, you can set boundaries, you can communicate, you can discuss. But if you treat your spouse like a child, if you treat your spouse in a similar way you treat a child, you probably have a dysfunctional relationship.
Did you want to respond to that or no?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question was, if Trent believes that women should be submissive to their husbands, does he believe that husbands should be able to discipline their wives?
Yeah, I think they should be able to.
And what does that look like? Could you think of an example of discipline that you would say, yeah, that's...
I think of the treadmill.
Discipline them by running?
You think husbands should be able to compel their wives to exercise on a treadmill, or else what?
I guess there's no way, you know. I don't think they should like hit him or anything like that.
But, that's good.
But I do. But yeah. But
Thank you.
No. But I do think men should have some level of authority. So I'd have to think about it. It's a good question. I have to think about it.
I appreciate the humility in saying you need to think about it. So let's see. Related locals questions from a supporter. Question for Pearl. Where do religious monks and nuns, in case that's an unfamiliar word, fit in this worldview of yours? Are they simply losers who have to leave the world? Or is this... So that's a good question, right? Because if you're right in saying that marriage is a bad deal for men, then are these monks and nuns, or monks, even sacrificing? You know what I mean?
I think they're fine.
All right.
Yeah, I would say that's just not what people intuitively recognize. They recognize that when someone chooses to be celibate, for example, they give up a great good. People just naturally know that. They're not like, oh man, that priest really dodged a bullet. It's like, oh no, he's, never going to marry for the rest of his life, not have sexual relations with a woman. And he does that for the benefit of the people of God. And there's other people, if you're not religious, you can do that. But we should recognize that most men are not called to such high levels of sacrifice. They're called to sacrifice for their families and marriage.
Joe Ward asks...
Can I add one thing
Sure.
first? I think it's actually very admirable. I think those seem like hard things to do, so I find it admirable.
Thank you. Joe Ward says, hi, Trent. How should we approach the subject of headship in our Catholic marriages?
Well, I think that it's important to understand that two people in a marriage, they're never going to be just, the complete same person, always having the same goals. I think it is important for one person to have some kind of a leadership position, but it doesn't follow that there's some kind of a king or a tyrant or a dictator. I think that there's oftentimes two extremes on here, which is the idea that men have no special leadership in marriage or men have some kind of absolute rule in marriage. And there's a long gradient in between those two positions. So I think that we have to reason through and look at what does the church teach, but also empirically, what kinds of communication styles work best, what kinds of ways of engaging one another work best. I find, honestly, in marriage, to have them be low conflict, women need to feel loved and men need to feel respected. That there's actually a book related to this subject, that if you have a marriage where the woman feels loved and the man feels respected, you have a very high degree of chance that marriage will be successful and positive.
And maybe I could ask you too, how do you think a man should approach the subject of headship in their marriage? What does that mean?
I think it's more that women should be obedient to their husbands in all things. So I think you should come into marriage with that baseline respect and understanding.
Do you agree with Trent, though, so long as it's rational? Like, presumably, if the man asked the woman to sin, you would disagree.
But the issue I get is a lot of people say that things are irrational that are not. I would say, I think sometimes that's weaponized against men to make it, if he gives me the tone I don't like, therefore you're not submitting to God. If you don't communicate with me in the correct way, you're not submitting to God. I see a lot of women weaponize that, but
just as husbands should correct their wives if they have a really bad idea that could hurt the marriage, wives have that same role because husbands sometimes get pretty bad ideas that can be harmul.
Yeah, but who determines it?
The person with a rational brain in the marriage.
Yeah, so the men.
So I guess so what's nice is in this debate we know which side is the more rational one, right? My side is more rational.
Yeah, but not simps. Respectfully, no offense.
Okay. The only simp here is you, Pearl. You simp for men.
I think you simp for women.
I think you let men get away with anything because you simp for them and like their attention.
I think you simp for women and you always pander to
No,
them
I respect women.
No, I think it's pandering, to be honest, but go ahead.
Pearl says, Sierra, what do you enjoy most about being a woman?
I think that, you get so much opportunity being a woman, so I would say that's what I enjoy. I think that life is nicer to women than to men.
Okay.
And you get to have kids. So I think that's cool.
Okay, what's that?
What do I like about being?
What do you like about being a man, Trent?
The thing I love about being a man is that when I go to sporting events, the line for the bathroom is really, really short.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah. It's piece of cake. So one. Easy.
My wife always says it's the one time she's tempted to identify as a man is more at the airport. The bathroom at the airport.
And I love being a father.
All right, last question. Kevin says, if a woman is fat, loses weight, and becomes attractive, is she now marriageable? Does that mean new behavior matters? OF model is now chaste. Oh, OnlyFans model is now chaste and repentant. Plenty of men will be interested. Can I just say, I think I want both of you to clarify, because sometimes this can be really general. Like, you ask the question like, well, what if someone in pornography repents? And I agree with you that it's not a deal breaker, but if it was my brother, I'd be like, you probably shouldn't marry this person. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It's the same as someone who's a drug addict who's clean. Like there's always chances for relapses. You're going to have varying levels of risk with people you choose to marry.
That baggage will end up in your marriage.
But even women, I would tell women to avoid that. That's one thing my dad told me, never date an alcoholic. Like that's just a problem you don't want. I would say the same thing for men. You should never date a porn
There's always
star.
going to be a gradient between for example, like there's women who want to marry guys on death row. There's women, that get obsessed with like serial killers. That's a pretty big red flag right there. Probably shouldn't do that. But in between that, we're going to have things that are of varying degrees of levels of risk.
But okay,
And I don't think men should marry women who are serial killers either.
Okay, but what about because my point is there just aren't enough wives to go around. There just simply are not enough. So.
And I would say I know too many women who ask me and my wife, where can I find a good guy? I've never met a guy who asks us, where can I find a good woman?
I mean, tell them in their friend zone. That's exactly where most women have men in their friend zone they can marry. We choose not to.
And Pearl, I do agree with you that one reason that women aren't married is that for men and women, some men have very high standards when it comes to weight or superficial things like that. And women have very high standards for superficial things like, does he give me the spark or not? So the women I know who are in the most successful relationships, they found a guy, he's a little bit shorter than average. He has a good job. He's a loving, nice guy. And they got a great marriage. But I agree with you that looking for the spark and friend zoning people can be bad for women.
All right, let's move into our 5-minute closing statements. So this has been an excellent exchange. I thank you guys both. Pearl, you'll begin with 5 minutes. Trent will close with 5 minutes. Neither of you will interrupt each other, and then we will wrap up. Big thanks to everyone for watching. Thank you, Pearl, for flying all the way from England. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that.
I guess I'm not doxing you by saying the country of England. No. All right. Whenever you want to begin, I'll click the 5-minute timer.
Give me 1 second. Okay, so I would say that objectively, marriage is a bad deal in 2024. Out of 100 marriages, 51 will not work out. And the reason they will not work out is because a little less than half, end in divorce. And the ones that you keep around, enough will be sexless, enough the women will gain weight, and enough women are not obedient and serve their husbands that the majority of marriages simply will not work out. The average woman is 170 pounds and 5'3". 1 out of 3 women has had an abortion. 1 out of 3 women has an STD. There are simply not enough wives to go around. On top of that, the court system is very unfair to men. There is a reason that 90% of the time women get custody of children. And what Trent will say is that it's because men are not fighting for their children. That is not the case. Men want to fight, but it is simply too expensive for them to do so. Men want to be fathers and have wives, but the problem is that women are not marriageable and the laws are stacked against them. Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Okay.
You sure you don't want to take it?
I'll add one more thing. I'll add one more thing.
Yeah,
sorry. The other issue we have is that women are paid to leave. You and I would never sign a contract where you are paid to leave. It would be unreasonable. You would just simply never do it. And I think the issue we have is that, men will come out and say marry women that are not marriageable, and it's simply men have too much to lose. There are false abuse allegations that happen. Their children are stolen. There's alimony, child support. And unfortunately, we live in a society where women weaponize these laws against men. I would love to see marriage return, but until the laws are changed, it will not happen. And for the time being, marriage is a bad deal for men. I would love to see alimony eliminated, child support eliminated, and 50-50 custody off of the bat.
All right. Thank you, Pearl, and thank you for coming. All right, Trent, whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
All right. All right. Well, let me draw together the threads of this debate. So Pearl's job was to show that marriage is a bad deal for men in general, not to show that some men who marry end up miserable. That's not her job, because every choice in life includes miserable people. There's lots of miserable people who cohabit with a girlfriend. There's lots of miserable people who never marry and are alone for the rest of their lives. Every choice has miserable people. Pearl's job was to show that men, on average, it's a bad deal for them. And that always has to be compared to all of the other available choices, lest you commit the comparison fallacy. So Pearl, for example, say it's a bad deal for men because women are 5'3", 170 pounds. Well, the average man, no, you can't talk now. Be obedient, quiet. Okay. The average man is 5'9" and 200 pounds. So he ain't no winner either. Instead, marriage is that institution for both of them to be able to grow together. The idea that it's not good to marry women because they're paid to leave. Well, when you marry, especially when you marry a woman who stays home and raises your children, the man reaps the benefit of unpaid labor of that woman caring for these children and tending for the household. And in many cases, you can have a
let him go.
Shh, quiet now. Your boyfriend can help train you on that one before marriage. So that you can.
Feel free to. I'll give you some more time.
That's fine. That when it comes to the idea that a woman it's a bad deal to marry someone because you might have to pay a financial penalty if they leave. Well, 2 economists in London have showed that in being married, a man gets $100,000 worth of mental well-being every year from the support that his wife provides him. And so every choice you make has risks and rewards. If your man says, oh, I'm worried about losing my money there, what kind of man will you be if you have a cohabiting relationship that's probably going to fail anyways? Or you're alone and you have all of your money, but you have no one to share it with. You have no children to pass it on to. What good is that? What good is the man who gains the whole world but loses his soul in the process, as our Lord says? So the point is, Pearl had to show that marriage is a bad deal for men. And look, she absolutely did not do that. When we look at men themselves, when we ask men, hundreds of thousands of men, was marriage a bad deal? They say no. They say that they're happy being married. All Pearl could do was accuse them of lying. When 65% of men who get divorced choose to go get married again, Pearl says, oh, well, they just must be crazy. Are millions of men, are they crazy, delusional, insane liars? Or maybe is Pearl just promoting a pessimistic view of marriage because it's one that's very popular on YouTube and on her various media channels? Which one's the more likely option here? So how did we see Pearl argue? She used the anecdote fallacy, which I said before, bad things to some people doesn't mean bad things for the majority of people. She used the comparison fallacy. Look at all of these risks in marriage, but never talks about the greater risks to your health, your livelihood, and your wealth when it comes to never marrying. Look, something really bad can happen when you walk down the street, but something really bad is more likely to happen if you never leave your house and you become a weird recluse. Look, I am not here saying every man needs to get married. My boss, Chris Check, likes to say man was meant to live in the context of a vow. Maybe it's priesthood, maybe it's religious life. Maybe it's a private vow to use your life for the good of others, like Batman. But it's really bad for men to be aimless and float through life chasing worldly pleasures. That's why every society has seen boys become men in marriage, primarily. That's what turns a boy into a man. And look, if you marry after your teens, so marry in your early 20s, finish college or an educational program, you don't cohabit together before marriage, you attend church weekly and pray together and have a support group of friends and family, the odds of you getting divorced are low, maybe as low as 10 or 5% when you do these things. And speaking from a personal note, I can tell you I love being married, even when it's very hard. You're going to fight more than you've ever fought, but you also love more than you've ever loved. And so if you want to learn more on this topic, I would recommend Brad Wilcox's book, Get Married. But I would also say, when it comes to being a man, don't forsake marriage because you're afraid. Men were made to cross the oceans in wooden ships. They were meant to fight an invading army and fight until the last man standing. You as a man were made for greatness and taking risks for things that are good for society, men, women, and children. Not sitting around all day watching black and red pill YouTube videos and complaining about women.
Okay, Trent, Pearl, I'm sure you've got a lot more to say, but I want to thank you very much for coming in here, having a civil exchange. It was excellent. I really appreciate it. To everyone watching right now, thank you so much for being here. Do us a favor and please consider becoming a supporter over at mattfradd.locals.com. We'll put a link in the description below. When you do, you can watch my almost 3-hour, very exciting, I think, interview with Jordan Peterson that we just had. It's only available over on Locals right now, mattfradd.locals.com. When you become an annual supporter, you get things like our Pints with Aquinas beer stein, our quarterly newspaper, and a daily podcast that we only have over there as well. mattfradd.locals.com. And very quickly, I apologize. Where can people learn about both of you, Pearl?
You can go to my YouTube channel, just Pearly Things, and the AudacityNetwork.com.
Trent?
Council of Trent, COUNSEL, trenthorn.com. My work is also available at Catholic.com.
All right. Thanks so much.